We're coming up now to our final speaker, Merrill Goldberg. And are we going to be able? There you are, Merrill. Good. We'll be able to project you. Um, so, Merrill Goldberg is a professor of music at California State University San Marcos, and she's director of the Art Equals Opportunity campaign of the Center Artes, dedicated to restoring arts to education. Not all activists march in rallies or carry picket signs. In Merrill Goldberg's case, she carried a soprano saxophone and a music notebook. She's going to share her story of evading the KGB by bringing information into and out of the Soviet Union to help people defect by utilizing her own homegrown encryption code that turned text into musical notes on sheet music. This inspiring journey of resilience, transformation, and humanity comes from 1985, when Cold War tension was very high. It's also an amazing journey into how music is fundamental to jobs such as cybersecurity, engineering, and more. She's going to make some direct connections to teaching and learning. Merrill's publications include the book Arts Integration, Teaching Subject Matter Through the Arts in Multicultural Settings. She's written other articles, editorials, and blogs based on her many research grants. Her undergraduate degree is from New England Conservatory of Music, and her master's and doctorate are from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Prior to entering academia, and as a professional musician, she recorded several CDs and was on the road for 13 years playing the saxophone with the Klezmer Conservatory Band. She's going to talk to us on cracking the code, teaching cybersecurity with music. So take it away, Merrill.
Indeed, I am thrilled to be here. I am actually by being here, I mean in Southern California. I happen to be in my car. How appropriate for Southern California. I missed the memo that we were on Eastern Standard Time. And so I'm actually at an art event, but I am thrilled to be here. And I'm going to tell you the story. And Larry's going to show a couple of pictures that I have. Larry, you can show the picture of me playing saxophone first. This is kind of an interesting picture, and you will see me back in 1985. So here's the deal. I was recently at a birthday party of all things about a year and a half ago, and cybersecurity folks were talking about the way that of what they did. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I don't know anything about cybersecurity, but I have a story. And my story is this. You can look at me. That's me playing saxophone 1985. You can take that off now and just put it back to the regular Zoom. In 1985, when the Cold War was at its height, there was a group of musicians in Tbilisi, Georgia, which is south of Moscow, who were really wanting to leave the Soviet Union. There were a number of people in 1985, mostly Jewish people who wanted to leave, and they were refused the exit visas. They were called refuseniks, but there were also dissidents, people who were Helsinki people who were human and really wanted to was part of all over the United States. Jewish groups were supporting people that were called refuseniks, again, people who asked to leave the Soviet Union but were not allowed to leave. Plus, Amnesty International and other aid groups got very interested when they heard there was a group of musicians in Georgia that had banded together, literally, to play music as a way to publicize their plight. And why publicize their plight? Because if people knew about you in the West, you had a much better chance of getting out than if people didn't know about you. Because if they didn't know about you, the Soviets could do whatever. So we were asked, I was already a professional musician at the time, playing Eastern European Yiddish music, which is called klezmer. If I and a couple of my buddies, actually Hank Snetsky, who was the lead, was asked to bring us into the Soviet Union, if we would go meet these people, find out more about what they did, and bring some information out as to what they really wanted to achieve. So we Hankus asked me, and I'm like, heck yeah, I'm in. Now I will say we didn't know at the time all of the politics, so I didn't understand. I knew there were risks, but I didn't know what the risks really were. Okay, I'll get to that in a second. In the meantime, we couldn't bring in names of people or information. It all had to be coded because we were told that if they saw some of people's names or addresses or information about refuseniks and human rights activists, we would be turned away. We wouldn't be let in at all. So we had to code it. And I'm thinking, okay, how do we code this? We're musicians. They're not gonna think twice if we put our code in music. So Larry, you can go ahead and put the piece of music up. So what I did is I created a secret code using music notes that basically spelled things out. So you can see on the right there, that's my music code. Oh, that's a coded piece of music. And to give you a sense, I just assigned letters to notes. And because you can use a chromatic scale and you can go from, like low C to high C, you can almost get the whole alphabet. And remember, most of the things that we were coding would be addresses. So it's already kind of coded in it. We had to learn Cyrillic, but that's another whole story. But basically, I created this secret code. So we get to the customs, and they had already been tipped off about us. You can take the music down if you'd like. And they started searching everything of ours. And I mean everything. They went through every single piece of my music, page by page by page by page, and then handed it back. Oh my God. We were so relieved. Now, I should say, I'm going to cut to the chase. We were interrogated several times. I was locked up. There were many instances, but we did make it to Tbilisi, and we met with the Phantom Orchestra, and we played music with them. And it was the most incredible, touching, poignant music I have ever in my life made. One thing that we really realized is no matter what happens to people, beaten up, jailed, interrogated, pushed around, they can never take away freedom in your brain. And when we were playing music, we were incredibly free, as were all the refuseniks and dissidents that we were playing with. Ultimately, again, the courage of the people we met was about a zillion times more than, the courage we had, although, we had some. And their stories were just incredible. And these were people who just were fighting for freedom, not unlike what's going on now. So on the way, we ended up getting deported, which was also something. And they searched everything again, but went through my music. And at this point, we had coded people's stories. So we were taking out quite a lot of information with us, but they went page by page by page and handed my music back. So we made it in. We evaded the KGB. When I tell this story now to cybersecurity people, they can hardly believe it because because 1985 was the worst year ever for spies. We were not spies, but people were disappeared. I mean, it was just an awful, awful time in US history. And here we four kind of nebbishy musicians make it past the KGB with a music code. So the cybersecurity people became very, very interested in this for a number of reasons. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the cybersecurity connections, and then which relate directly to teaching and learning and to STEAM, of course. And then if there's any time, I'll take some questions or hear what you have to say. So I hadn't really put cybersecurity in the STEAM list. For some reason, because I didn't know anything about cybersecurity, I'm thinking it was just something I had completely no idea about. But when I really, now I understand, cybersecurity really is in the whole STEAM realm. You know, it's a lot of problem solving. Cybersecurity people are, you know, essentially engineers that are have to be very creative, have to get past very other creative people who are hackers, who are, you know, using a lot of skills. So at a cybersecurity conference where I gave a speech, I met up with the head of CISA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency. And I've learned that their main goals are things like thinking outside the box, empathy, working well with others, being mindful, taking understanding, sitting back. And what I ended up doing was realizing that indeed, music and the arts have everything to do with all of the same goals that we have, or that, you know, agencies who are working in cybersecurity have. So we learn in music to think outside the box. We learn empathy, and my God, you know, playing with each other, that's something. Working well with others is something that we learn as we do ensembles. Being mindful, being disciplined, practicing, and nuance. So we learn nuance. When we're practicing, we don't play like robots. We learn from a teacher every week, or from our teachers at school. We learn how to practice, how to be disciplined, and we learn how to take feedback. And not just feedback, we learn how to be nuanced. So we learn how to interpret and play things in a way that, you know, sounds the way we feel it should musically. So all of those are the same exact skills that they need in cybersecurity. And another thing that the cybersecurity people told me that is very interesting is when you're trying to get bad guys every day, you need to step back and be able to relax. Music is one of the things that enables people to be able to relax. And in fact, the head of this, Jen Easterly, plays guitar and, you know, recognizes the power of the arts. So in a previous research study, I had worked with Viasat, which is kind of like Qualcomm, Hewlett Packard. It's one of these big, you know, high-tech engineering companies. And they have already said, as Hewlett Packard and others, that they have to keep at run in music because they think that they'll be able to, you know, do better, improve, box, all these same things. So we did a study to find if that was true. And indeed, the company Viasat that we did a big study with engineers, meaning myself and some business professors, found in fact that the engineers by and large did have a much bigger years of studying, especially music. And it made a huge difference to them in their jobs. They felt they wrote very articulately how it, you know, they could think well, they could work with people that they didn't particularly like because they were very well practiced in work and playing in ensembles, and it helped them think outside the box. So these connections became quite tangible. And I would say the other thing is that the engineers are by and large white male. And so one of the really big challenges that we have obviously in STEAM which I think we're doing a good job at, is bringing in more people of color, more women. And in cybersecurity, it's exactly the same thing. They're reaching out to universities like mine, Cal State University San Marcos, which really features first gen. We have more first generation students than anybody else on our campus. Almost 80% of our students are first in their family to go to college. So again, freedom. Music can give that to you in your brain. Empathy, thinking outside the box, having courage, feeling confident, working well with others. I never in a million years would have put cybersecurity on the list of anything I had to do new. But when the story again came up from 1985 of evading the KGB with music and by creating an encryption in music, people started paying attention. Okay, with that, I will just say, if you want to know more about the KGB and the music code, there's Dina Temple Rassin, formerly of NPR, who has her own podcast called Recorded Future. Has there's podcasts, or if you just Google me with cybersecurity or KGB, I'm sure lots of things will come up. Larry, go ahead and show the last slide, because it's of us in Tbilisi, Georgia. And after this, I'll entertain some questions and comments if you've got them. All right. So on the top left is Edward Gudava, and he was he was one of the dissidents. On the right, top right, are the Gudavas. And I should say the Gudavas were Catholic refuseniks. And also they were in human rights dissidents, Helsinki monitors, which meant keeping the Soviet Union in line with treaties they had signed about human rights. An interesting fact, in the picture on the right, the handsome man in the middle under the word let is Zviad Gamzakhoria. We had no way of knowing at the time that he was so important. Yeah, you've got the pointer at him. He was a dissident, and a poet, an amazing, beautiful poet. He ended up being the first democratically elected president of the state of the country of Georgia when the USSR broke up. On the bottom right, that's Hankus playing, showing the piano, electric piano. We ended up giving that piano to the refuseniks, with one of the refuseniks that we met on our trip. That was also in Armenia, that particular picture. Then the last picture, bottom left, is I'm in the middle there, and there's Hankus and Jeff and the Goldstein family, and they were incredibly willful, confident people, the Goldsteins, who were really leaders of the Phantom Orchestra. All of them eventually were released, which is just amazing, in part, again, because of so much lobbying on their behalf. Ted Kennedy actually intervened on the Goldsteins' part due to our connection with that, and they got out. And their son, Avi, who's not in this picture, he was only 11 years old. Here's a crazy thing, too, for those of you in Pennsylvania. Avi and a young boy who was 12 years old at the time in Pennsylvania, whose name is Josh Shapiro, were pen pals. And Josh, those of you in Pennsilvania, the guy who's running for governor, attributes a good part of his ability, ability and his attention to human rights and political activism goes all the way back to being engaged with helping Jews and non-Jews get their freedom in the Soviet Union all the way back in the 80s. All right, with that, you can take the pictures down, and if there are some questions, I'd be happy to take them. I will try to get to the chat as well, to see if you've got some questions.
Walter Smith had a particular question. He says, "Amazing story. Did you jumble the alphabet in the code, or did it go for example, from the Cyrillic equivalent of A for the bottom note to the Cyrillic equivalent of Z for the top note?"
Yeah, good question. No, I used transliteration, so I kept with the English alphabet basically, and there were some overlapping notes, but I could figure out what it was. I should also say I wrote it like piano music with a bass clef and a treble clef, but it wasn't piano music at all. I didn't pay attention to the clefs. Everything was G clef, even if it had an F clef. And for numbers, I actually, because when I was a student at New England Conservatory of Music, I practiced using the phone book. Remember phone books? And so I would sing phone numbers, assigning a note to each number. So I memorized phone numbers by just making up the tunes that went with them. That's how in Moscow and some people in Tbilisi and Yerevan, which is in Armenia, we could call them. Hopefully they answered. But in Tbilisi, we had to actually just find people because their phones had been disconnected, and that's a lot of what my coding was directions to people's homes. So again, I used basically the English alphabet, kind of transliterated into what was Cyrillic, and took it from there.
Wow.
Now I should say, because I don't know if any of you are curious about it, but I think that you could code by using the music itself, like what it sounds like. Because I read a really cool study at MIT that there are people looking at how spiders make silk, and they actually put it to like there's a code to make it into music, and they can hear when there are differences. So I love the oral idea, but I think there's like so many possibilities in music for coding, both the kind that I did, which is really just note to letter, but I think you could do it like musically. It'd be kind of cool too. Oh, I see Greg has a question. Hiya, Greg. It's good to. I'm glad you're on this. If I had a similar mission today, would you do coding differently? And if so, how? I think the code worked really well, to tell you the truth. And I did mix things up so that if someone really wanted to try to break the code, it would still be hard. Now that some people kind of know the code, I would certainly do it a little bit differently. But in hindsight, no, I think the code worked really well. And one of the things that I learned was once you learn a code, it's very easy to, write things out. So we took out, 10, 20 pages worth of stories, people's stories, but we were able to code fairly quickly once we had the code down. And yeah, so I would do that. And, the other thing that I really think about is moral courage, and what gives the people courage to stand up to authorities, to go in or do something like we did, which I think took some courage, but not nearly as much as the people who are standing up. And I think that having music as a way to, bolster your confidence, but also take you inside and make you feel at peace and free is so important. And yeah, I would do it again. There were parts that were pretty darn scary, but I think it was really worth it. And it changed my life without a doubt.
Wow, this is an inspiring talk for sure.